kick off the start of your week, this is the Monday Show with Stella and Cam. Hello and welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the Smart Entrepreneurs Podcast. I am Cam H. Lynch.
That was a bit sexy there. I'm Stella Hugh.
Just a bit sexy. And welcome to the Monday Show, where we give you tips, trade secrets, I guess, and no Panama Papers, though, about entrepreneurial life, running your own business, and etc. We're here to help, and hopefully we can help you today with the pros and cons of VAs. And that rhymed, and I didn't even mean it to. Stella, how are you today?
I am good.
Yes, throat's a bit sore.
Yeah, throat's a bit raw.
That's all right.
Still can't get over the sexy intro, but
If you are aroused, press 1. No, I'm sorry. Sorry for anyone who's offended by my unsolicited, sexy voice.
Yes.
We will try to keep it professional for the remainder of the broadcast.
Yes, but yes, a bit of a raw throat, so I am sorry if I sound a bit funny or funnier than usual.
You might sound sexy soon. The husky.
Hello. This is Shane from
That's a
Walking
good
Dead.
Shane from Walking Dead, aka the Punisher, or Adele on a good day. Yes, so the pros and cons of VAs, we have quite a bit of information. And this is something that I think a lot of people, they kind of want to know when they should go into getting a VA as well, which is something we'll definitely be covering later down the track. But I think before they jump into that sort of weird relationship with someone who's kind of your staff member but kind of not, yes, we're going to be dropping the truth bombs on you in regards to, especially from our experience, because how long have we had our VAs for?
Oh, about 2 years?
I'd say so, yes. And there's some interesting things to learn. There'd be some nice things we wish we were briefed on before we brought these people on board. Nothing ridiculous, but just little things that you go, oh yeah, I never considered that because of this reason. But yes, we are here to hopefully shed some light on that. So these are all little things you should take into consideration. Stella's got some fantastic little tipettes at the end as well to if you decide you want to go down this road and make this selection. Because hey, VAs aren't for everyone. And depending on the type of business you run or the type of work you create, they may or may not be, your golden ticket to sort of fast track to business success. But hopefully the pros and cons we'll be dropping today will give you a little bit more insight as to making your decision.
Now, before we hired our first VAs, we did do a little bit of research. In fact, we had a couple of VAs that weren't that great.
I was going to say, before we hired our first VAs, who aren't currently with us now,
Yeah.
but we wish them the best wherever they're from, or whatever they're doing now.
So they weren't exactly the best, but we did our research, and I actually read this book by some of you may have already heard of it, by Chris Ducker, called Virtual Freedom: How to Work with Virtual Staff to Buy More Time, Become More Productive, and Build Your Dream Business.
Yes.
This was actually a really good book, and it helped me to pretty much understand where I should, what I can actually assign to a VA,
Right.
what I should assign to a VA, and what I should do myself, how to exactly free up my time.
Yep.
Which is very important because for a lot of us, especially your business is your baby. It's so hard to let go. Even something as simple as answering an email, you don't want someone else to screw it up. You just want to make sure it's done right. So the book really helps you to understand where you should be and what you should be working on to effectively in your business and what you can assign.
Yeah.
We actually have a copy of this book to give away.
Yes, we do.
Yes, so stay tuned to the end of the show to find out how you can win a copy.
How you can win a copy of Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. And the stuff we'll be talking about today, I don't know if it's covered in depth in this particular book. I would like to think some of the truth bombs we're dropping on you today are a little out of the league of what's in this book. I mean, not that it's not to diminish the fine qualities of this tome, but yeah, it's a fantastic book, a great jumping off point if you want to get into the world of VAs for sure.
Yeah, it is a great book. And what we are covering today is something that the book didn't quite mention. Because the thing with Chris Ducker is that he does run his own remote staff company. So a lot of the book, not saying that he's biased or anything, but
no, but he is biased. I think he'd be the first to admit that.
He has the right to be biased. I mean, all the stuff he writes in there is true, but he does. There's a lot of things in there that it's looking at it from a more positive angle than the cons that we might be looking at today.
He's biased, but he's not a liar. He's not exaggerating his claims. He's saying, this is a system I've utilized. These are the results I've got. I've enjoyed it so much, I've decided to become a vendor of the system, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
So again, yes, you can win a copy of this book and stay tuned for the information about that at the end of the broadcast. But now on to the actual content of the show, the pros and cons of VAs. I think we'll kick it off with pros first.
Yes.
And with the cons, we're going to give our experience some of the slight drawbacks or quite large drawbacks we've had in using virtual staff or virtual assistants, but we're also giving you some insight as to how we've overcome those issues with differing degrees of success, but we'll let you know about those as we come across them. Stella, if you'd like to kick off the pros.
The pros, obviously, the first one that comes to mind when hiring a VA is it frees up your time. You know, it helps you to do things you don't want to do or you don't have time to do. It's important, though, that it depends where you get your VA from.
Yes.
Obviously, if you get someone who's local, they're a lot more helpful. You don't need to explain everything to them as much.
Yes.
But they can be quite costly.
Absolutely.
And on the flip side, if you get someone from, say, Philippines or India, they will take a lot longer to learn each task.
In most cases, yes.
But they'll also save you a lot of money.
In most cases, yes.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
as long as they don't do something that makes you lose money.
No, precisely. So comparable to the task that someone you would source locally, they're a great money save and a time saver as well, especially for mundane tasks. So if it's things that are repetitive, if you have to sort of take stock of, articles or inventory or whatever your business is, that's sort of a grindy process you need to do day after day or week after week. You could assign this to a VA either daily or once a week if that's how the process runs. Train them up how to do it, and Bob's your auntie. It's basically, and then it frees up your time to be able to do what you want and actually focusing on your business as opposed to in your business. Absolutely. I found that another very positive thing is that your staff can work anywhere in the world. So like Stella just mentioned, from Philippines or India, but if we're looking at very skill-specific staff or remote staff, they can be from anywhere. And that also, so if you can't hire the person you're looking for domestically, you can go to any country in the world, and as long as the job can be performed online or digitally, it's not an issue at all. Where you hit your snags is obviously things where you're like a commerce business and you're producing sort of physical goods. VAs aren't going to help you that much there, unfortunately. But I mean, with suppliers and things like that might help. But when it comes to actual skill acquisition, that can really help you. So not only can they work from anywhere in the world, but they'll also have a skill set that, say if you need to work, learn Excel, and everyone, I'm sure most of the people listening to this podcast, 95% of them are shaking their fists at Excel because everyone hates Excel despite the fact that it's probably one of the most awesome, useful programs in the world, but no one wants to learn it. So if you can pay someone who knows how to use it and can write formulas and do all sorts of things like that, that's a beautiful way to obviously pretty much outsource not only the work, but the skill set as well. That's really, really important. Yeah,
and it comes under the whole mindset that, we're trying to build with this podcast as well, and the site is you work smarter, not harder. And that's the thing. How much is your time worth? Your time is very valuable. If you're running the business, you own the business, your time is more valuable than anybody else. So should you really be spending the time answering the emails, doing the research, learning Excel? Probably not.
Nope.
Whereas if you can pay somebody $4 or $5 an hour who's already trained in the field, why is that not the way to go?
Precisely. Yeah. Why would you learn something and not be an expert at it, and then your time, however much that costs, trying to do this one task, when someone who's very well versed in Excel or whatever you're hiring them for, and you can hire them for substantially less of the cost for you to both learn and then execute it? It's a bit of a no-brainer, essentially. And I mean, that Excel is a very basic example, but anything online, if you're developing sort of SaaS, software as a service, or developing an app, there are people out there and teams of people out there as well that you can hire. And this is sort of, I mean, this is sort of getting away from the VA sort of virtual assistant thing for someone helping you with the day-to-day operations and more into specialized staffing. But they're kind of two sides of the same coin. If you're going to start
It
off...
all comes under the VA umbrella.
Yeah. Hiring remote staff, essentially.
Yes, yeah.
So, and there are people who've had fantastic success with these particular types of staff. And there's also some people who have had sort of less than admirable results. But just it is a very big tick in the pro box category for hiring a VA. Stella, what else have you got there in the pros category?
I've also got that if you find the right person, they will be hardworking, they will be loyal, they'll be a great asset to your team. That is a very big if. I'm just saying this from experience.
Yes.
I'm getting to the cons already. No. It is a big if because there are so many people out there who offers their services as virtual assistants. Even the local ones, even the ones you're paying, $40, $50 for, they might be doing a terrible job. The price certainly doesn't dictate the quality. But I mean, obviously, the more local ones, the people that don't have the language barrier issues and things like that, would obviously be easier, and it's easier to find someone who is on the same sort of wavelength. On the flip side, though, people from Philippines, Indonesia, India, they need the work. So they are guaranteed to put in the hard hours. They will do the work the way you teach them to do it. Whereas I find that from my experiences with local VAs, they tend to use their own initiative a bit too much, or they've got, other people's work that take priority over yours. And so
I think there's definitely a cultural difference there. And I think from domestic work, you're absolutely right. They feel that, well, if I don't do this job, or if I quit altogether, I can just go on government welfare or whatever plan B they've got stores, live with my parents or whatever. But from these, VAs who live in the developing countries, or even sometimes less than developing countries, 9 times out of 10, it is their livelihood. They have families, they have, wives and children and extended families to look after. And how much you pay them, even though from a Western society perspective, it's a pittance. It's a very small amount. For them, it makes a huge difference.
And
Absolutely.
You know what? There are a lot of people who say it's bad to hire VAs from for such little wage from Philippines and Indonesia and all of that. But at the end of the day, they are happy. That's their cost of living that you're paying them. They are happy that they've got a job. And you know what? Give them days off. Give them bonuses. You have no idea. Like with our VAs, when we give them a day off, paid, they are so happy. They're so grateful. Whereas I can't say the same would happen if it was, a local VA. If anything, they'd ask for days off constantly. And
They would expect it. Much.
Exactly.
And that's the worst thing. And I think also it's when you say, how dare you exploit these people for paying them so little, but it's a like for like market. If they were to try to source the same kind of work domestically in their home country, there's no way they would get the same amount of pay rate. There's no way they get the same amount of benefits of working at home and things like that as well. So all things being equal, as Stella said on the front foot, you do get honest, hardworking, loyal ones. You also get that domestically, but on the flip side, you also get sort of lazy, entitled ones that are, a bit duplicitous and things like that as well. So you get that worldwide. I don't think it's limited to any one group of people. I think freelancers or VAs in general will all exhibit these traits at one point or another. Just how much they do it's purely based on the individual. So again, and like Stella said, just after the intro, the VAs we have now aren't the ones we originally hired because it can be a bit of a trial and error process. But more on that in the cons section. Another big pro for them, obviously with anyone that's sort of a virtual assistant, is you don't need to find physical space for them because they work remotely, and you don't need to get hardware for them. So you don't need to buy a new computer. You don't need to log them into a mainframe. You do, of course, need to have a good system in place for sharing files, communicating with them. So we use Skype quite often. We also use Asana for breaking up tasks and things like that as well. But that's a massive cost saving there as well, that you don't physically need to house these people. You don't need to pay insurance for them. You don't need to pay to buy them new hardware if anything breaks. The onus is on them for them to be able to perform the tasks that they say they can do. Therefore, they have to keep all their hardware up to date. They need, which can be, again, unfortunately, a double-edged sword. If their computer breaks or whatever and they're out of commission for a couple of days, there's not much you can do about that. You can't then go, well, I've got a spare laptop in my spare bedroom. You can go and use that sort of thing. They have to then, fix it and things like that as well. So, but we've been kind of fortunate in that regard, I think. I think power outages are the only things that we experience with our VAs at the moment.
Yeah, our VAs are based in the Philippines, so we do get a lot of typhoons.
Yes, weather-based
weather-based
interruptions.
Yeah, they're down electricity, landslides. It's actually quite horrible. It really it
In
puts
comparison to
it kind of puts you back in a very humble position and think, one of my workers has no power, no water.
Is about to give birth.
Yeah, is about to give birth. This actually happened
Yes,
too.
that's what I'm saying. They're not all pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just makes you realize, like how lucky and how fortunate you are.
So another pro is making you thankful for your position.
You should be thankful anyway.
If you are considering hiring a VA for your work, then yes, that is a massive pro in and of itself that you're at that level that you can physically hire someone. Anything else in the pros category that we need to?
That is all I've got in the pros.
That's all we've got in the pros for now. So essentially, saving time, saving money. They can work anywhere in the world. Different time zones than you as well. I think that's something that we kind of just covered. Is that like as soon as you clock off, depending on where they are, they can clock on and do some work, and then when you wake up, hopefully the work will be done. But again, that's something we'll cover in the cons if things don't quite go to plan. And of course, you don't need to find a space or hardware for them and things like that. So with every good thing, everything being equal in the world, there's always a bad thing. So the cons, training your staff. So again, because if you do decide to hire someone domestically, chances are you go, hey, you know how to use this program. Oh, yeah, not a problem. Can you do this, that, and the other? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, go and do it. And then a couple hours later, it's done. Whereas when you're hiring someone from a different country and there's different language barriers and communication gaps, sitting down and explaining them, going, okay, do you understand everything? Yes. Okay, see you later. And then 8 hours later, how's that coming along? Oh, yeah, I got stuck on that first bit. Okay. And that's where the wheels can sometimes fall off. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and I think we've actually experienced this quite a bit in terms of and to be fair, our VAs, especially our general VA, so the one who does a lot of the administrative tasks, her English is very good.
Yes.
So there's not much of a language barrier there, and I think it's just it comes from more a cultural sort of mindset of they are not familiar with the work that you are giving to them.
Yes.
It's not something they see day to day. I mean, for us, it's so easy to just jump on Facebook. Everyone knows how to use Facebook. Everyone knows how to use Twitter. If we say research this, we just go on Google. We know exactly what to type because there's that sort of initiative and common sense there. Whereas with a VA from another country, they might not be familiar with, what the systems are, what you actually use it for. I mean, for them, they might only go on Facebook to talk to their parents, or just chat with a friend. They've never used any other functions. They don't know what pages are. They don't know what groups are. So you have to actually start from the very, very basic and teach them like you are teaching a child, essentially.
Yes.
Not in a condescending way, in a sort of, you have to start from scratch.
Basically, the learning process is from the embryonic stage of whatever you're trying to teach them, essentially.
And don't expect them to use initiative.
No.
That's a mistake that I've made many times.
Don't expect them to use initiative, but really quickly, if I can interject, they'll never say no to anything.
Exactly.
And that's the big huge issue. You're like, oh, can you find some images for some social media posts? And you think, oh yeah, social media posts, they have to be sort of in line with branding and they're like bright and fluffy or depending on whatever. Yeah, I can do that, no problem. And then they find you these weird whatever they are. And it's like completely out of like, did you look at anything? And because they don't actually know, but they've still put their hand up for the job because they don't want to disappoint.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest issue is that, and it's taken a long time for us and our VAs to get to get that understanding that if you have an issue, it is okay to ask us a question.
Yes.
It is possibly just because in their culture they don't want to disappoint. If they ask a question, if they ask their boss a question over there, it will make them seem incompetent.
Absolutely.
Or they might annoy their boss.
And exactly. And it could be that they were let go from a previous arrangement because they weren't doing this, or they weren't like putting their hand up for something, or whoever hired them before expected too much of them. So they said, well, I can't say no now because I'll get fired again, sort of thing.
Oh, here's a funny story.
Oh, yes.
I hope she doesn't hear this. She's not transcribing this, is she? But one of our VAs, actually, when she first started, I hired her based on her skill levels, based on the fact that she can speak English fluently. She's had experience in, certain things. But it turned out that she was actually pregnant at the time, a few weeks away from giving birth, and she didn't tell me. Now, funnily enough, in the Western culture, if that actually happened, it will probably be a sackable offense. The fact that you're hiding the fact that you're pregnant. You obviously can't hide the fact that you're pregnant if you were walking into a workplace.
Physically there.
Yeah. But for her, she thought being pregnant will mean that she wouldn't get the job because that's the way it worked over there. It's the way it works in some places anyway.
For a lot of places, yeah, absolutely.
Which is not fair. But for her, she was actually planning on when she was going to give birth. She had it all planned out that she was going to give birth on a Friday night, and then she can take Saturday, Sunday off to recover from the birth because, there's no working on Saturday, Sunday.
Plus, you can decide exactly how long the birth's going to be.
Exactly. And then Monday, she would come back to work, and I wouldn't know a thing.
Yep.
And
you have to admire that level of planning.
I know.
To try to, or at least the dedication to the job, basically.
I know.
So,
and what would have happened if, she took longer in labor or the baby decided not to come on a Friday, it came on a Monday instead? Was she going to tell me that there's a typhoon in Philippines, maybe? I don't know. Maybe.
It's a boy.
Yeah. But ultimately, I found that out because we became friends on Facebook, and it was very obvious from her photos and the people congratulating her that she was heavily pregnant.
Yes.
But that's the thing, there's such a big cultural difference that they feel there's a lot of things they can't ask, they can't say, they have to hide because they get treated so unfairly where they are.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really interesting point that she wasn't withholding this information from us because she was trying to be sly or duplicitous. She was doing it because she didn't want to disappoint us.
Yes.
And she didn't want to compromise any chance of her obtaining this job, essentially.
Which she needed because she was having a baby.
Precisely. So if you go into the attitude, it's like, well, how dare she? She's lying to you from the front foot. She must be terrible. It's like, no. From her perspective, she's thinking like, I'm so focused on this job. I can have this baby and be back and rolling on Monday, and your operation will be running smoothly without a hiccup at all. So she's coming from a place of, I don't want to disappoint my potential employers, and as an employer or as someone, you have to look at it from that perspective and go, she's not trying to do a dodgy on us. And again, if you have a baby, it's kind of a tell. Like you'll figure it out eventually, sort of thing. So, but it is funny that they do see it, or some people from some cultures can see it like that. And if anything, that's a pro from us, saying like, if we want to deal with other people from other cultures and other societies, this is how we sort of have to change our thinking occasionally. So, but the con is, of course, that training and language barrier and things like that, of course. So again, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So then having to understand that they do come from a different culture, and you can't actually treat them like they know exactly what you're thinking.
No.
Like a local VA, you can tell them to use their own initiative. Just a lot of the times, if I go and ask one of my local staff to do something, I'll just say, use your own initiative, do what you like, and then come back to me. I'm sure it'll be great. With a VA from, Philippines or Indonesia or India, you would have to actually be very specific with your instructions and make sure they follow it,
Yep.
And that's where, we use a lot of tools like Camtasia.
Yes, so how we get around this is using...
Yes, Camtasia, Jing, which are both screen capture programs. Camtasia, you do have to pay. It is, I think, $99 a year. Or...
it depends on which platform. I think it's actually cheaper on Mac than it is on Windows. So check your device. But yes, Camtasia is very good. Jing has a limit though, doesn't it?
Jing is free.
Yes.
But it does only let you do 5-minute videos. Yes. And I did start off using Jing, but it drove me nuts because my videos are always longer than 5 minutes. It'd be like 5.5 minutes. You're like, I just need to get that last word in.
Yep.
So, but they're both amazing.
Yep.
And like I said, Jing is a free option if you're just getting started as well. So.
Jing is great if you just want to start taking videos and helping that with training your staff. If you want to upgrade to Camtasia, I would highly recommend it. I have it for my MacBook. It's amazing. And you can get into really good detail with Camtasia. You can zoom in on things and you can pan and you can make it really look really clean and efficient if you were training, say, a bunch of people. But the good thing about training people via video is that you've got that video for good. So, heaven forbid someone leaves or you have to replace them, that same video you can use to train other staff, basically. And that's a really good way to get, and it's so visual and everyone understands visual and they know exactly where to go. So it's a really good way to train your staff. either domestically or internationally, and they can rewatch it, and they're not picking up on concepts. They can go back and watch it again. Saves you so many hours of actually having to sit there and do screen capture and showing them or sharing your screen and going back and forth. If you are interested in learning more about these programs, you can find the links in the show notes for both Camtasia and Jing as well. Keeping them to task is a big thing as well, because it's not like you can just mosey on in past the cubicle and go, hey, what's happening? Like seeing how they're doing with work. So making sure they're staying up on their tasks, that was a big challenge for us as well, obviously.
It's always hard when you give, someone else something that you've been doing all this time and you know exactly how it's done. But especially even harder when, if they come back with a question and you're like, oh, are they doing it right? The easiest way that we've found is to use screen monitoring programs or software. Which is available online. The one we use is Hubstaff. And what it does, it basically, your VA installs it on their end. And when you log on, you are able to see screenshots of everything that they're doing. Hubstaff is free up to a certain number of employees, I think 1 or 2 users, and they start charging. It's great because you can see exactly what they're doing. It makes them accountable. I mean, they know that. They're the ones who installed it. They know you're watching them. And it just makes them accountable. And then if you see any mistakes that they're making that they're not asking you about, you can sort of step in and say, look, I've noticed you've done this incorrectly. It is also bad, though, because it is easy to get a little bit too controlling and sit there and watch them all the time, which is not what you want to do, because the whole point of hiring a VA is so it frees up your time to do other important things, not spy on your VA.
It doesn't free up your time to do less important things that you would originally do.
So that's just something to be mindful of if you do go down that road. Obviously, you do need to build a sense of trust between you and your employees anyway, if you want to develop a long-term relationship. But the screen monitoring is just good to have, just to give that sort of reminder that they are working. They can be checked if if you want to. So.
And if you do come from the approach of we've installed the software just to make sure that we can give you the support you need to do the work effectively, and we can obviously check to see if it's doing it right, and if you need any help, we're obviously just a Skype or a phone call away, as opposed to Big Brother's watching you and all that sort of stuff. So that's always very important. And we also use Asana, which is I think something I mentioned before, either on this show or the previous one, and that's just with tasks and things like that, and they can either check off on tasks and things, so you can kind of monitor them from there. But that's sort of them sort of self-moderating their workload, as opposed to you actually seeing what they're physically doing in real time, essentially. And if you want to know more about Hubstaff, again, that's the information in the show notes as well.
And moving on to the next con, one that is an issue anyway, regardless of whether your VA is here or overseas or anything like that, is security. So a lot of the times, if you want them to work on your sites, if you want them to do certain things, you need to give them passwords. What they do with that password is it's hard to track.
Yes.
Because they're not sitting there right in front of you. You don't have the systems in place for them. They could very easily save it for convenience, save it in a notepad, and their computer gets hacked, and then,
Or just on a Post-it note
Exactly.
on their monitor, and anyone could just walk past.
Exactly. So that's always an issue. And I think that's an issue anyway when you are working with anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like security is always an issue. But for virtual assistants, it's even more so because you can't see them.
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, in the West, we have very stringent protocols as to, Stella and I both from a corporate finance background, if you have like notes on your desk and whoever's the head of compliance walks through, it's like, well, what are these passwords doing out where cleaners or anyone can see them? And you get in big trouble, whereas obviously there aren't that limitations or the stringent sort of protocol in line with the VAs. So how do we get around that?
I mean, the best way, obviously, to get around it is to not give out any very important passwords to begin with.
Yes.
But obviously, sometimes you can't help that, because if they need to access your WordPress site to do any sort of maintenance or uploading of blogs and things, they will need important passwords.
Absolutely. So you can always use a password secure site like LastPass.com. What that does is its main idea is so you can pre-log into all your websites that have any put in passwords over and over again, and you just put in like the one password. I think OnePass is another one that's a similar version. But I know with LastPass you can make a password so they can access certain sites with a separate password, so you know sort of what they've been on and what they can and can't access. So they don't have access to your entire suite of stuff, but you can limit and mitigate exactly just how much they can see as far as the password's concerned. So stuff like that's good. I'm not too sure on the plans at the moment, but again, you can see the details in the show notes, and that's definitely a good solution there.
Yeah, and likewise, there's with most programs, but like things like WordPress, they allow you to create users with certain security levels.
Yes.
So they can only access certain parts of your site, even things like Shopify. If you give someone access, you can say they can only access the sales page or, they can access the blog and things like that. So just make sure you've got all those sort of
measures in
place. And
absolutely. And lastly, one of the other cons is keeping them busy. So if you do have a staff member, for instance, who does sort of website design or maintenance or something like that, and you don't constantly need work done on your site, what can you do? Like, you don't, they're on the books sort of 24/7 or a normal work week, but you don't want them just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. So for instance, our web design person, we get them to design sites for other people, for clients and things like that as well, social media banners and things like that. So you're still using their skill set, but not specifically what you hired them for, but they're still happy to be obviously doing the work and kicking out designs. And we've now sort of created another revenue stream essentially using this person's skill set.
One thing you do have to worry about, though, not worry about, but just be mindful of, is if you are outsourcing your VA, you will need to double check their work and make sure, they are on the right track and that they're giving the client what they need. Because it's one thing if they do something and mess you up, but it's another if someone is paying a lot more money for that service and you're playing the middleman. It does get a little bit annoying.
It's another skill set you have to sort of learn, essentially,
Yeah, so it depends what you want. I mean, obviously, if your VA need is a web designer, you need someone to design your websites, and you don't have that much work for them, and you want to outsource, and you don't mind sitting there and making sure things are running smoothly, that's great. But if the whole point of you hiring a VA is to get things off your plate, make sure you are not adding more on unnecessarily.
Yes, absolutely. Because when the work comes through that you need prioritizing and you're sort of snowed under with all these other backlog of jobs, that's when you can kind of snooker yourself. Also, you can sort of sit down and have a brainstorm session with other staff members or just with yourself and kind of come up with a list of sort of fallback tasks that your staff can do if you don't have anything specific they need to address immediately, and putting in that little bit of effort at the front, working smarter instead of harder, and you'll see the benefit from your VAs for sure. So that's all the cons and sort of how we've overcome them. But before we leave today, Stella's just got a few little miscellaneous points, that sort of experience that she's had with the VAs and hiring them, and some stuff that, as good as virtual freedom is, and we are still giving that away, if you stay tuned, we'll give you the information as to how you can enter to win that. But here's some little tidbits that we've come across that we'll hope you'll find helpful.
Yes, so the first one I wanted to talk about was where you should hire from. That's obviously a big thing, and that was one of the reasons, I think, why our first couple of VAs didn't work. So let's talk countries. So most VAs generally come from the Philippines, India. There's ones in USA, Indonesia, and local. By local for us, I mean like Australia, or even US, Western
UK.
Yeah, UK, English-speaking countries. So that's what I mean by local. Where you should hire from entirely depends on your needs and your affordability. Because India and Indonesia, the language barrier, from my experience anyway, was a lot tougher. And there's less understanding of our culture and the type of work that we were doing. So it was just really difficult to try to get the point across. And it took... I think we had them for like a month, and in that month,
if that,
and in that month, I think they managed to complete like a couple, like maybe 2 or 3 very simple tasks. But obviously, their costs are lower. So if you do have the patience and the time, and you do find a good one.
If we knew about Camtasia back then,
exactly,
it might have been a different story.
Exactly. So I mean, that's my experience anyway. Philippines. We've got 2 VAs at the moment, and they're both from the Philippines. I've found them to be the best in terms of language. Language wasn't that much of a barrier, and there's a lot of people in the Philippines that have degrees and speak English every day. So and a lot of them are quite westernized.
I was going to say, it's a far more westernized society, so there's less of that. There's less of a gap there. There's still a gap, definitely, but far less.
Yeah, and their costs, they're not that much higher than India or Indonesia. They're probably pretty much on par. You'd be looking at about $4 to $6 per hour for a full-time VA.
Australian dollars.
Australian dollars. So
50 US cents.
Yeah, 50.
Depending on the markets right now, but yes.
Yeah. So it is quite effective.
Absolutely.
Cost effective. And if you're looking for local, it is quite pricey. I've used locals before, and I've found that they just don't care about your work as much because a lot of locals they're never doing just your work. They're doing yours and 10 other people's. So their attention's quite scattered. They don't need you essentially. No. So you are paying them $35 to $40 an hour, and they're just not paying that much attention.
Yeah.
So, but they are the best choice if you are looking for someone to do high-level work, important work, or maybe short projects, things that need to be done fast and correctly straight from the get-go.
So also the price dependent for the outsourced to sort of developing countries is also dependent on experience and skill sets as well, obviously. So ones that have sort of skills that are higher in demand, you're going to pay a little bit more, whereas sort of the administrative ones in in that sort of VA space, again, the prices can fluctuate wildly. So
and I think that there are a few different services that provide VAs. Obviously, to find a VA, it's not just as simple as putting up a job ad on the internet.
Or kind of can be, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it for sure.
Yeah, so there are different companies that help you source a VA. One of them is, I think it's called like 247.
Yep.
I think that was the one we used initially. Or Girl Friday.
Or Chris Ducker's company.
Yes, Chris Ducker's company, which I'll get to very shortly. Yes. Remote staff is one as well. So they've got a pool of people who are waiting for jobs, and you can pretty much just go in there, tell them what you need, and they'll try to find someone for you.
Yeah, I think the idea behind it is they pre-vet sort of applicants for whatever job you're doing.
Yeah, but the only issue with those type of groups is that, well, not an issue, but with those, they have a third party. They have a middleman, essentially, who will who stands between you and the VA. So the VA actually works for that company, and you are basically contracting them out from that company. If there are issues, then you can go to that company, which is great. But you never actually build a relationship with them because you are not actually paying them.
No.
You are paying the company, and the company is paying them.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of third wall
disconnect.
Thing. Yeah. Which I don't really like.
So the reliability is there because there is a recourse for action if things aren't taking place, like if you aren't getting the work done or whatever, but you're paying a premium and also you're kind of a third party sort of applicant in this sort of business arrangement, essentially.
Yeah, and what I found was that when we had issues with our first VA, the company was very quick to swap to another VA who wasn't much better, to be honest. But you get that, you have someone who can replace easily, and they'll help you with that. With Chris Ducker's service, which is Virtual Staff Finder, what he does is you pay him a fee of, last I heard it was like $350, something like that.
Yeah.
And they will find someone for you based on your skill set, and you actually go and meet this person, negotiate, not meet, like Skype.
Yeah. They did the introductions, basically.
Yeah, and negotiate pays and do all of that, and then they work directly for you. And that's what the good thing about this is, that the fee is just once off, and then you negotiate your pays. With the other companies, they take a margin of the per hour rate you are paying the
ongoing fees.
The VA. So the prices are higher per hour
because they bake those into the costs, obviously.
Yeah. So it just depends on what you're after. I mean, obviously, if you're hiring direct, you don't have that third party to go, hey, this one isn't working out well. But at the same time, with Virtual Staff Finder, I know that they give you a few
options. Well, candidates.
Yeah, so it's really up to you what you're after.
Yeah.
And lastly, I just want to say, make sure you pick the right VA. Don't hire a general VA and expect them to do web design work, and don't hire a web designer to do your emails, because they are trained very specifically.
Even if they say they can do it.
Yes, even if they say they can do it, because they probably will say they can do everything just to keep you happy. And just be patient. Don't be annoyed if
Absolutely.
you give them a task and they don't get it right the first time, because chances are they won't get it right the first time unless they've done it before. And I've found that with my VAs now, we've got quite a good relationship going.
Yep.
We've got quite a good understanding, and I know exactly how to communicate with them to make sure they understand the task effectively.
Yep.
And it takes time to build that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the crux of what Stella's saying is that treat these staff members as you would any staff member that works in an office or your place of business, and treat them with courtesy, treat them with kindness, come from a perspective of, I want you to do the best job you can do, and just have some patience with them because of the whole communication thing, how they perceive information and things like that as well. But yeah, being patient in this whole process will pay dividends down the line 100%. Now, onto the competition for Chris Ducker's book, Virtual Freedom. You can win yourself a copy, and we'll post it out to you no matter where in the world you are, unless you're on the moon, which is not in the world, so we won't be sending it there.
Unless Australia Post has banned your country for some reason.
yeah, that's within the flying limits of Australia Post. You just need to jump over to our Facebook page, which you can find from our website, smartelabs.com, and find the post where we've put this podcast and answer the question on there. And the question, of course, is if you had a VA or thinking of getting a VA, what is the biggest task or the biggest sort of pain point you would have them solve? So basically, if there's some really mundane task or something really super fantastic you'd like them to do, give us an answer, your best answer, and we'll pick an answer at random, and we'll be sending you a copy of Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker as soon as the postal service can send it to you. So once again, just on the Facebook, answer the question and you're in the draw. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Smart E Labs podcast.
Yes, and you can subscribe to us via iTunes or Stitcher Radio, and please leave us a 5-star review and share the show with a friend.
Absolutely. We drop a new show 5 days a week. We are busy people here at Smart E Labs. If you want to check out the schedule or what's coming up, please head to smartelabs.com/podcasts, or just go to smartelabs.com and go to the podcast tab for finding out what's out and what's coming up.
And when you're visiting the site, you can also see where we're hanging out on social media as well. Or if you'd like to chat with us a little more intimately, you can email us at info@smartentrepreneurslab.com, and we can catch you there. And thank you once again for listening. But until next time, I'm Stella.
And I am Cam H. Lynch, telling you to always work smarter, not harder. See you later.